Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, I mean it when I say you genuinely could not have chosen a better moment to find this channel. Because today we're not just covering a tournament entry or a ranking update. We are talking about a full-on cultural moment, a shift in the entire landscape of women's professional tennis. And it is happening right now in real time, centered around one 20-year-old woman from the Philippines who is moving faster than anyone in this sport expected. Alexandra Eala has officially secured a direct entry into the 2026 BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells. Let me be very clear about what that means because the details matter here. She didn't receive a wildcard handed out by tournament officials. She didn't scrape through qualifying draws hopping her body held up long enough to earn a spot. Her ranking, her actual, legitimate, hard-earned world ranking, placed her directly inside the main draw of what the global tennis community has come to recognize as the fifth Grand Slam. The BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells carries that kind of prestige, that kind of weight, and Alexandra Eala belongs in it. She earned her seat at that table through results and nobody can take that away from her. Now think about the field she's walking into. This tournament runs a 96-player main draw, and every elite player on the WTA Tour is required to compete. No exceptions, no scheduling conflicts used as excuses. That means Aryna Sabalenka, the woman currently sitting at world number 1, will be there. Iga Swiatek, number 2 in the world and arguably the most technically complete player of her generation, will be there. Elena Rybakina, the reigning Australian Open champion who hits the ball with the kind of flat, heavy pace that makes even seasoned veterans uncomfortable, will be there. And Coco Gauff, the American who just gave Eala a sobering lesson in Dubai, will absolutely be there. This draw is a gauntlet from top to bottom. And Alexandra Eala is stepping into it not as an outsider hopping to steal a round, but as a ranked, seeded competitor with the form and the firepower to shake things up in ways that will make people remember this tournament for a long time. Just 12 months ago, that sentence would have sounded like wishful thinking. A year ago, Eala was doing what most rising players do in the early stages of their careers, fighting through smaller events, grinding qualifying rounds, celebrating just making it into main draws that the top players take for granted. But something changed. Actually, a lot of things changed. The results started coming, the rankings started climbing, and what began as quiet progress turned into one of the most exciting ascents in recent WTA history. Today we're going to walk through exactly how she got here, what the Middle East swing revealed about where her game is right now, and what she'll need to do to make a serious run through the California desert starting March 4th. So let's get into it. To really understand the momentum Alexandra Eala is carrying into Indian Wells, you have to look at the full picture of her 2026 season so far, because she's been relentless from the very first week of January. She opened the year in Auckland at the ASB Classic, immediately setting the tone by reaching the semifinals. No warm-up period, no easing into things, she came out playing aggressive physical baseline tennis, and made it clear from the jump that this was going to be a different kind of year. From Auckland she traveled to Australia, where she won the Kooyong Classic exhibition event, handling high-quality competition in a high-pressure setting, and proving that her level wasn't just a one-week flash of form. Then came her Australian Open main draw debut, which ended in a tough first-round loss to Alicia Parks. That stung, no question. But what Eala did next tells you everything about her mentality. She didn't retreat or take time off to feel sorry for herself. She flew home to the Philippines, competed in the Philippine Women's Open for the fans who had been following her journey from the very beginning, and then immediately turned around and headed to the Middle East for the next phase of her season. And that Middle East swing is where this story really started to accelerate. At the Abu Dhabi WTA 500, Eala played one of the most impressive matches of her young career against Alexandra Sasnovich. She dropped the opening set 2-6 and looked genuinely out of sync, like the match was slipping away before it had really started. But then she dug in. She found some reserve of calm and belief that most players her age simply don't have access to yet, and she turned the match completely around. She took the second set, pushed it to a third, and then closed out a tiebreaker to advance. That is a veteran move. That is the kind of mental toughness that coaches spend years trying to develop in players, and Eala produced it at 20 years old in a high-stakes WTA 500 environment. She went on to reach the quarterfinals in singles and the semifinals in doubles alongside Jamie Forlees, which also says something important about her physical conditioning. Playing deep into a tournament week in both disciplines demands a lot from a body, and she handled it. But the real measuring stick came in Dubai. The Dubai Tennis Championships is a WTA 1000 event, one step below a Grand Slam in terms of prestige and prize money, and the fields reflect that. Eala had originally been listed as a qualifier for that tournament, but her ranking had risen quickly enough to bump her directly into the main draw. She made the most of it, working her way through to the quarterfinals before running into Coco Gauff. And I want to talk about that match honestly, because the scoreline 0-6, 2-6 could easily be misread if you don't understand the full context. Yes, it was a lopsided result. Gauff was operating at a completely different level that day. Her topspin was relentless, her footwork was impeccable, and her ability to push Eala so far behind the baseline that she could never find her rhythm was almost textbook in how perfectly it was executed. Eala couldn't get any purchase on the match. Every time she tried to impose her own game, Goff had an answer. It was a tough afternoon and there's no point sugarcoating it. But here is what actually matters about that loss. After the match, Eala sat down in front of the press and said something that revealed exactly who she is as a competitor. She didn't make excuses about the conditions or her schedule or anything external. She looked at the result clearly, acknowledged that the players sitting in the top 5 of the world rankings currently operate at a level above where she is right now, and said that the work she needs to do is about gaining experience against that specific style of play, not about talent, because the talent is obviously there. That kind of honest self-assessment, delivered calmly at 20 years old after a painful loss in a major quarterfinal, is not something you can coach. It's a mindset, and it tells you that the gap between Eala and those top 5 players is not going to stay as wide as it is for very long. You can guarantee that her coaching staff at the Rafa Nadal Academy has already broken down every single point of that Goff match frame by frame, so now the focus shifts to Indian Wells. And the conditions there are worth understanding in some detail, because they could actually play right into Eala's strengths. The courts at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden are heavy and slow by hard court standards. The ball bites into the surface and kicks up high, significantly higher than you'd get at a typical hard court event. At the same time, the dry desert air means the ball travels through the atmosphere quickly before it makes contact with the ground. It's an unusual combination that demands exceptional footwork, strong physical endurance, and the ability to generate your own power rather than redirecting someone else's pace. Players who rely on flat, low-trajectory hitting often find themselves making adjustment after adjustment just to stay competitive out there. Eala, on the other hand, has spent years shaping her game on the clay courts of Spain under the Rafa Nadal Academy system. Her forehand carries heavy topspin. She plays from the baseline with a high contact point and generates her own pace rather than depending on the surface to do that work for her. The high-bouncing courts at Indian Wells aren't a problem for that game style, they're an advantage. She'll have the time and the space to set up her ground strokes exactly the way she wants to. And then there's the freshness factor, which is genuinely significant. Think back to the 2025 Miami Open, the tournament that turned Alexandra Eala into a global name. She had to go through qualifying before any of that run happened. She had to win matches before she was even officially in the draw, which takes a real physical and mental toll that gets underestimated by people watching from the outside. She went through all of that and then somehow beat Iga Swiatek, Jelena Ostapenko and Madison Keys on her way to the Final Four. That run pulled her ranking from somewhere outside the top 140 all the way into the top 75 in a matter of weeks. This year, she doesn't need to qualify. For the first time in a tournament of this magnitude, she arrives at the first round with a full week of preparation behind her, no accumulated physical wear from qualifying matches, completely acclimatized to the desert environment. That is a different experience entirely. That is the experience that top players take for granted every single week, and Eala is now in that conversation. But there's a dimension to this story that goes well beyond rankings and results, and it would be a mistake to gloss over it. What Alexandra Eala is doing for the WTA Tour from a cultural and commercial standpoint is extraordinary. Tournament directors in Doha, Dubai, and Manila have started reaching for a very specific comparison when they talk about her drawing power. They're mentioning Manny Pacquiao. As in, the magnetism she generates around her matches is being compared to the greatest combat sports figure the Philippines has ever produced. That comparison sounds like hyperbole until you look at the actual evidence. At the Australian Open this year, the queues of fans waiting to watch her practice sessions were longer than the queues for some of the main draw matches happening simultaneously. Her Instagram following is approaching 1 million, with engagement numbers that blow past the WTA average by a significant margin. She's generating crowd sizes that put her alongside players like Novak Djokovic and Aryna Sabalenka, athletes who have spent a decade building that kind of following. And the reason is simple. She carries the weight of an entire nation with her every time she walks onto a court, plus a massive global Filipino diaspora that spans every continent. When she plays in California, a state with one of the largest Filipino-American communities anywhere in the world, it will not feel like an away match. That stadium is going to erupt in a way that Indian Wells doesn't typically see. The noise, the flags, the energy, it's going to be something else. And for a player who genuinely feeds off crowd momentum the way Eala does, that atmosphere becomes its own kind of competitive advantage. There is real pressure attached to all of this though, and it's worth being straight about that too. The expectations surrounding her have become enormous, and some of her fans are already talking about Grand Slam titles as if they should be arriving any moment now. Anyone who understands how elite tennis development actually works knows that's not how it goes. Even the greatest players in history took years to convert promise into major titles. Eala still has clear areas of her game that need to grow. Her second serve remains a liability that smart opponents will target, And her transition from the baseline to the net, which Goff picked apart brilliantly in Dubai, needs refinement. Her job at Indian Wells isn't to go out and win the whole thing on the strength of belief alone. Her job is to keep stacking experience, keep beating the players she's expected to beat, and keep testing herself against the ones above her to learn what's still missing from her game. Every match she plays at WTA 1000 level is an investment. Every set she competes against a top 10 player teaches her something that practice sessions simply cannot replicate. She's scheduled to play both Indian Wells and Miami back-to-back, the exact same swing that made her famous a year ago. The symmetry of that is not lost on anyone, but she comes into this one as a completely different player, ranked higher, more experienced, more physically prepared, with a clearer understanding of both her strengths and the gaps she needs to close. A deep run at Indian Wells would mean more than just prize money and ranking points, though both of those matter. It would mean higher seedings heading into the Grand Slams later in the season. It would open doors to major sponsorships that reflect her growing global profile. And most importantly, it would continue to show an entire generation of young athletes across Southeast Asia that the path to the top of the sport is not closed to them. That a girl from the Philippines can show up in California with a direct main draw entry, compete against the best players in the world, and belong there completely. The gap between where Alexandra Eala is right now and where the top 5 players are is real. Dubai showed us that honestly, but everything about the trajectory she's on, the work ethic, the coaching environment, the way she processes setbacks and keeps moving forward points in one direction, that gap is closing, and when it finally disappears, the tennis world is going to feel it. March 4th cannot come soon enough. If you're as excited about this as I am, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments, who do you want to see Eala draw in the first round? Can she recreate the magic that made Miami 2025 unforgettable, this time in the California desert? Leave your predictions below. Until next time, watch the courts closely because history doesn't announce itself before it happens. It just does.